Good afternoon, everyone. Tēnā koe te whenua, tēnā koe te whānau, tēnā koe te kātoa. Welcome to today's meeting, 17th of May 2023. We'll just open with karakia and council affirmation. Whakatake te hau ki te uru, whakatake te hau ki te taonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai, e akia nā te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei, mauri ora. Let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Welcome to Councillor Phil James joining us online for today's meeting. And other than that, I believe we are all here and there's no, Bob, sorry, there's an apology for this afternoon's meeting. Can I move a second for Bob's absence? Shane, thanks. Deborah, Tara, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. There's been no identification of any extraordinary business. So any conflicts of interest people would like to raise? And public excluded. Thanks, Deborah and Malcolm. What is in PX? We'll deal with that in PX if that's where it sits. I'd like to begin today's meeting with a presentation of a gift, and this is on behalf of Selwyn District Council Diversity and Inclusion team and council staff, and we'd like to present the Sakina Community Trust with a small gift. All about. Staff are given the opportunity during Unity Week to leave messages on this beautiful tea towel for those affected by the mosque attacks. Unity Week, 15th to the 21st of March, was established in 2022 by the Sakina Community Trust, a not-for-profit group led by 7 incredible women who lost loved ones in the tragic March 15th Christchurch mosque attacks. We thank you for the work that you've been doing within our community, and we remember and honour the lives lost while also promoting a socially cohesive society. So thank you very much for the work that has gone on, and this tea towel just acknowledges that from us.
Thank you very much. And we really appreciate we also appreciate all the work and effort that the wider community puts into growing social cohesion and wider Canterbury, Waitaha. So thank you very much from all of us. That's really lovely. Thank you. Can I get a photo? Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah. You want to see the detail too?
Push the chair out of the way. There we go.
Good, thank you.
3, 2, 1. Just one pull up. 3, 2, 1. Awesome, thank you.
Much appreciated. And any other support towards Unity Week becoming worldwide, nationwide in the years to come? Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but also to pass it on your time. We have the confirmation of minutes from the 19th of April meeting. Move in a second for those. Malcolm, thank you. Seconded. Shane, thank you. Are there any discussion on those minutes? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. And it's the end of that. There's public matters under investigation. The Taumotu flooding, which I have, or Liz Brown has said that Taumotu will host a conversation down there as a next step. I followed that up with Liz late last week, and she's still looking to confirm a date for that conversation to happen. We will be invited, ECAN, Taumotu and the landowners around there to discuss that. Community halls, centres and libraries network plan. The report on the land backing by lands now for future community facilities is due May 23, and report on Selwyn Hut licences same is coming back, David. That's to happen The timing here both says May for those.
End of this month, Mr. Mayor.
End of this month. Great, thank you. The next is my Mayor's report, and I'll just note there's a couple of items that were missed off here that should have been mentioned. Councillor Epihar attended the King's coronation ceremony on my behalf, and Sophie attended something you messaged me yesterday about.
Oh, that was sort of the camp speak thing, but Melbourne was the one.
Great. Sophie was also at the Camps Fair events though, and should have been mentioned. And I'll just note that there's one thing I'll take out of here, which when this was written, I had intended to be there that day, which was the planting of 400 natives that is occurring today and was delayed last week because of the weather at the time. So that will be removed from this report. Other than that, you can see the items that I have attended and some commentary around some of the things going on in our community. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. Otherwise, I'll move that you receive my report. Seconded, Nicole, thank you.
Sorry, you're going to say about the shout out?
I was going to say about the shout out, but Shay has asked that she would like to be present and she will be here at the next meeting. So Shay's done an amazing job, but I'll save that little speech for her being present next time. Cool. Thanks, Nicole. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Declare it carried. David?
Mr. Mayor, councillors, thank you very much. My report is in front of you, has been read. For the public record, I'll just highlight some of the key points in there. The first one is in respect to the Infometrics update for the quarter ended December 22. The outcomes from that, firstly, Selwyn continues to be one of the fastest growing economies in the country. Our economy grew by 4.4% in the year to December 2022, which is ahead of the national growth of 2.8%. Consumer spending grew 16% over the same time period, and that's ahead of national growth of 10%. Employment continues to grow strongly, up 6.6% over the year, and again, compared to national growth of 2.5%. Interestingly, our unemployment rate is held at a very low figure of 2.2% at the end of December. And new dwellings continue to be consented at a high level, 438 new dwellings consented in the December quarter alone. The district plan review has hit an important milestone with hearings of all submissions finishing last month, and in total, councillors covered 38 different hearing topics. The proposed plan is a rule book for the activities that property owners can do as of right and what activities, of course, need a resource consent. And we would like to thank everybody who has taken part in different stages of that process. And we look forward to celebrating the end of the process around August, September of this year. Hui Hui Mai, over 1,300 Selwyn residents took the opportunity to share their thoughts on that. Of the Selwyn respondents, 83% agreed with Greater Christchurch having a focus on growth around key urban and town centres, along public transport routes, of course. 24% were open to living in higher density, and of the respondents, 19% used public or active transport. And feedback from the Hui Hui Mai survey will be used to inform plans about transport and infrastructure and urban planning, and they'll go out for public consultation later this year. Finally, Mr. Mayor, just a reminder that we're seeking to hear from users of the Foster's Dog Park and residents in the area about a request from the Selwyn Dog Club to extend the days they can use their park. The club has requested to add an additional training class on Monday nights, intends to reduce class sizes to allow trainers to better manage their classes and improve parking. And that consultation is open until the 2nd of June. So happy to answer any questions on any items, Mr. Mayor, or refer to the managers if there are specific technical questions.
Oh, thank you. Deborah.
Just one, and it's on page 21, and it's the manager for enabling services. I see that the maximum value for financial commitment for the officer is $60,000.
Yeah.
Just wondering, is this new or is this has it an increase?
It's a new position.
It's a new position.
Yeah.
And And how does that 60,000 fit in with other responsibilities?
What I will be able to do, because as you know, we've brought a number of new positions on recently. So we will be providing a schedule of those levels of authority, and we'll make sure we distribute those to elected members for your information.
Okay. Is there a possibility that when we actually do have your report at the end of June, that we also have available the council's policy manual? Because the delegations manual and the policy manual should actually cross over with the understanding what the delegations are.
Keyword is possibility. It's currently in train at the moment. There are a number of processes around policy manuals, a number of staff who are involved in that process, and the time frame, I'd love to be able to take it off the top of my head. I just can't remember the dates, but if it's not end of June, it's early July anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Steve.
Right. On the same vein, I'm assuming that expenditure would be either already approved through a budget or LTP or annual plan process. It's not a delegation to purchase outside a direction the council's taken.
No, for absolute clarity, it's of budgeted / approved expenditure, not outside any process.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I just wanted a little bit of clarification. So it's got here, Selwyn's house price values, the sales volumes of Selwyn falling 28% from the year to December 22. Is that a continuing downward trend? Also, you've talked about nationally consents are expected to nearly halve over the next 2 years. With the falling prices and the high interest rates deterring new builds. On top of the regional economic profile shows that the GDP fell despite a rising payout. Talking about the expenditure and growth in the district, does that increased expenditure come because inflation has increased the prices? So we appear to be spending more, but it is on the same amount as what it was before.
Sorry, increased expenditure on what?
Just generically talking about our Selwyn spending growth.
I think that the easy answer to that is that there are a lot more businesses than there were 12 months previously.
So
think about Tennyson Street shops, for example.
So just in terms of the collative effect of the distinct change in terms of the consent rates, the reduced amount of sales volumes, etc. Are we expecting to see that as a continuing trend going forward?
Personally, no. And there was an interesting article in the press on the weekend which talked about growth, and it's probably worth referring back into that. And they made some interesting observations about the curve for Selwyn as opposed to A, Canterbury, and B, nationally.
Thank you. Any further questions on the report? Mover and seconder. Thank you, Lydia. Seconded, Malcolm. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Carried. Thank you. The next item is tab 9, page 33, Canterbury Water Management Strategy. Tēnā koe, Les. Thank you for coming along today, Les. If you'd like to come to the front of the room. Phil Dean is online, as I mentioned earlier. Matt Johnson is also joining us online. Matt, tēnā koe to you. I'll let Les talk in the first instance, and then Matt will throw to you after that. Les, if you just want to press the right-hand button on that microphone in front of you, that'll be great.
Of course. Yes, and council, it's good to be back here in this seat talking about the zone committee. It's been quite a while in 2021 as the COVID kept us away, but we're back now. In the meantime, I've worked my way up to being the chair of the zone committee. I'd like to acknowledge Matt who's online. He's the deputy chair. He's a new person come on the committee this year, and he's been invaluable. He's a very knowledgeable person around water and especially around fresh waters. We are a very young committee now. With only 3 of us been on more than 3 years. Myself, another Runanga rep, and Vicky from ECAN. The only ones who've been there for more than 3 years. The rest of them, I think, one of my moko and a couple of others are just going into their 3rd year now. I think you know Khan, he was on the council junior or committee or whatever they called it. He's on our zone committee as well and doing well on it as well. So it brings in, we got 2 young ones in there, another one, Tyler. She's a young wahine, she papas to Ngāti Waiwai as well to Ngāti Piti. And having those very young, Khan is 18 and Tyler, I think she's only about 19, 20 as well. So having that young view has been very helpful. We are looking to change our concept of our committee for the last, since 2020, 2010, we've been listening to about what's wrong with our water. So now we want to change it in this point to talk to the community. What can we help to do in the community to fix our water? We've had nothing letting us know what's wrong with it. We all know what's wrong with it. It's very contaminated. We have $50,000 a year to get out from ECLEAN to environment groups. This year we've given out $44,000 so far. A lot of it went to the Boat Creek nature park they've got going down there. Very fantastic. You haven't had a chance to go down to the Boat Creek, go down and have a look, see what type of work they've done. They've done a huge amount of work. So we're still looking for a lot of money to help in the second stage of it. We also sustainable Ellesmere agriculture. We funded them this year to the tune, I'm not quite sure how much we've given them. But Jamie probably tell you that anyway. And then the Kaikouri we funded them again this year. And as a group, I think that we will fund, and I think other environment, especially the council, will fund for a long time to come. They do a fantastic job. We also have members on other community groups. I just came from, I had to leave the Coast Forward Wetlands Development Group to come here and to skip the site visit with Andy Spankton to get here in time. We also have a member on that. Like Kirikiri Working Group, we support that, and we actually started that group off, then passed it back over to the community in full. We had members on, I think when we first started, about 5 of us, but we felt that we didn't want to tie our zone committee members down too much. That's not what they was there for. So we passed that back to community group. And another one we are discussing is the intensified housing around, especially around the sensitive areas around the Te Waihora. We understand that we need the housing, but probably not so close. Like Lincoln is right on the shores of the old Te Waihora. Now, if you put 1,000 houses in Lincoln, there's not a lot more than that gone there. You've got 2,000 cars. You've got probably 4,000 pets that all districating around the area. All that ends up at Te Waihora. We don't no longer want to be the slump at the end of the catchment. The only way to do that is to stop it getting there and have a lot of wetlands back from the Te Waihora. I think I've taken enough of your time. I hand it over to Janie. She's our coordinator she needs want to add anything.
Kia ora koutou. I'm, as Liz says, Jamie, and I'm the zone facilitator for the Selwyn Waihora Zone Committee, also relatively new as well. I don't have anything additional to add, but I'm just wondering if there are any questions.
Do you want to offer Matt the chance to say anything now?
Matt, you wish to, Matt, you wish to next talk to me. What's your contribute?
Kia ora. I think the only thing I'd like to say is that over the next few months as a committee, as a new committee, we've got the opportunity to really think about our priorities and where we want to fit in with this zone, and how we want to make an impact. There's a couple of things that have been raised by the local community that we believe we should be kind of following up on. One of those is around nitrate testing. The other one is around kind of supporting further community groups, and particularly at the top of the Selwyn. But as I said before, and as Liz said before, we are a new committee, but I think we do have an opportunity to kind of really look out and connect with the community in a meaningful way around issues that, environmental issues in particular, that concern them. So kia ora, thank you.
Thank you for that. There's a couple of questions or comments. Councillor Scott, Deborah is first and then Elizabeth.
Thank you. Just with regards to your report, and it's not coming up with a page number for me, in tab 9, you talk about the Ellesmere Sustainable Agriculture, and I think you've got the maps actually, you've twisted. You've got Corbett's Road where the Discovery Plant Out Day for the Arahuri Reserve should be. So they're in the wrong designated area. But maybe I have a conflict of interest here, but I'm just looking at where the property on Corbett's Road is. And I'm just like to know the location of where that property is, just to make sure that I don't have an interest in it.
I can pass you the address for that later if you like, but you're not on the zone committee, so that shouldn't be at the just reporting. So
okay,
it shouldn't be in a conflict.
It's just that I didn't know about it. That was all. So yeah,
we have no control where they go, where they plant on. They put an application and say they want to plant on that road, and they give us a precise area.
right.
We don't know the owners of where they want to plant.
Okay,
It's not our jurisdiction to know the owners. It's only if we give them the funds. If we find something that's dubious within the application, we don't give them the funds. But with the application, we didn't find anything wrong with it.
okay.
We'll find that information out later, Deborah.
Yeah, I can, but I just sort of noticed it, and I'm just thinking, where the
There's no
location was.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Hi, thank you for raising your concerns about the housing intensification early in Lincoln, which is close to the old shores of the lake. I'm just wanting to know, obviously there's a lot of nitrate testing going on and checking the waterways. Do you have any concerns for other types of pollutants and contaminants getting into the waterways, such as the from the building and industrial waste and things like that? Are there any other areas of concern there?
Absolutely. We didn't get on board 30 years ago when they started intensifying farming in the area. But now we have intensifying housing and buildings. We've got a whole different type of contaminant. We've got heavy metals. We've got E. coli and all those type of ones are just the same or not as bad. Even worse than nitrates. The nitrates will break down. Heavy metals never break down. They stay there in the sediment forever. So we can stop them from going into their waterways at an early stage, especially from intensifying housing. And within the scope of their consents, maybe we should have things like reusing grey water, metal traps, generator for the coming off the roofs to catch all of that. That should be part of the consents. We get a lot of consent. I work with the MKT on the issuing of consents as well. And we never see one who says a grey water tank is going to be built, it's not that we say, well, can that be included? And it shouldn't have to come from the Runanga to say, can that be added? That should be caught up at the start by the council. Part of the consent should be grey water, heavy metal traps.
Thanks for that, Liz. Anything further from councillors? No, Jamie, sorry to introduce you at the start. First time with me, so thank you for coming in and supporting the presentation today. Matt for being online and Liz for coming into the room. We really appreciate the work you do for water and the environment and across Selwyn. And thank you for your leadership. And obviously, when you've got a new committee, some of the institutional knowledge and decisions made and reasons for those over the last few years is really important to have that continuity. So thank you for the way that you bring that to the current committee. Thank you. There's a recommendation at the end of that report that we receive move and seconder that we receive it. Thank you, Sophie. Malcolm, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next item is the endorsement of the draft Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan for public consultation. Tim Harris is here and Tracy Tierney's here as well.
So were you going to do the Christchurch West Melton one as well? Or
It was both. I hadn't. As someone wanting to speak to the Christchurch West, are you wanting to say something?
No, I just assumed this.
No, they're not here. So
I was asked to speak on behalf of that group. If you indulge me.
we'd love you to, Phil. Speak to us. So great voice.
Kia ora, and thank you for listening to me today. I apologise that I can't be there. I recognise the gap in the chairs from the angle I can see it. It's a very big gap. Didn't realise I had left such a big gap. Look, I wanted to talk. The reason why I've come into this is that I just wanted to talk about the other water committee, the zone. It is a incredible. It's an incredible zone committee. They're very passionate. Half of the group is new, half of it is the existing group, being the community group, and everybody knew the elected officials. Now it's been a bit of a slow start because for a long time Selwyn was the only elected officials that were there outside of ECANS, and as time's gone by, across Christchurch and the Runanga have got the representation there. Their main focus is on, not surprisingly enough, the Opawaho Heathcote River network and the Avon Otakaro network. I talked a lot about the 3 days that the water takes to travel from one side of Otautahi to the other versus the many years it travels through Selwyn. And they heard what I was saying, and they seemed eager to know whether there would be anybody in Selwyn's patch that would like to, make a plan and if you effectively go for funding through the zone committee. But I think the spirit of the zone committee itself is that the Selwyn Waihora zone committee is the one that services Selwyn best. The main things that were being spoken about for this zone committee were the erosion, sediment, and pollution in the Otakaro, Avon, and the work that is being done to remedy that. Except for the fact that it's probably one of the best council meetings that I go to, I do want to continue the conversation about whether the relevance of us being involved in that group is current. And I guess I'd be interested to hear from other councillors what their thoughts are, some of them who have been there before and some of them who maybe they have an insight that I'm missing. So I'll leave that then. Look, you can ask me some questions. I will try to answer, but I've only been to 3 meetings, so I may not be as in-depthly knowledgeable as the Selwyn Waihora crew.
Well, thank you for that. And I guess there's a very small part of Selwyn's geography, which is covered, which is why the focus is so much on the two rivers you mentioned, and that's the area behind West Melton, an area behind Templeton, an area at the bottom of the Port Hills that kind of feed into the Christchurch network, and the rest is all coming this way. So there are people in our community who are landowners and community members around those places. I think it is important that we have a voice into that committee because it affects, or could have the potential to affect, land use in Selwyn, because that's part of the area that it covers. But as far as following up with the conversations about the future of zone committees, I think that is something that ECAN is currently considering, thinking about the stage where zone committees were in 2013, 2014, which was developing plans and understanding rules and connection to community. And then sort of from 2016 through till today, reasonably project focused. And then as Liz was saying, just before, some really key community groups that have been a part of things that have come in and out of the zone committees and given back. So let's have that when you're in the room with us, Phil, around Selwyn's connection and contribution. If there's anything more we would like from you there, but I do know that ECAN's wanting to have that same conversation with all zone committees at the moment. Are there any? Yes, Phil?
No, yes.
Okay. Anything else from any councillors? No. Thank you, Phil, for being in to us. We have got, we've already moved that report as a part of the previous recommendation. So the next report is the endorsement of the draft Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan for public consultation. There's one name to be added under H. Nicole Reid is our independent, as the recommendation to the independent chair that we appoint Councillor Reid as our member of the hearings panel. And Nicole and Lydia and I had talked about that through the last couple of GCP meetings, but we hadn't put that in here ahead of this report landing on your table. So that's the direction of that conversation to date. I'll hand over to Tim and Tracy, and welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Sam and councillors. Just like to welcome Tracy Tierney to the table. Tracy has been here before. Tracy is the director of the Greater Christchurch Partnership. So what I intended to do, I'll take the report as read, and but what I'll do is step you through a few key highlights and then just pass over to Tracy to say a few words. So the first thing to note is that the Whakawhanaki Kāinga committee approved this draft spatial plan for consultation last Friday. And those resolutions, which are not dissimilar to the ones you have in front of you, were circulated under separate cover. They would have appeared in Diligent, I think, on Friday of last week. So this is something to note. So look, this has been workshopped with the council on a couple of occasions, so you should be reasonably familiar with the material.
Sorry, so I'll just stop you. Hey, Phil, if you're online, so do this, mute your microphone. Thanks.
So just in terms of the key points, I guess the first thing to note is that this work comes from the urban growth agenda, and the Whakawhanaki Kāinga committee has been fundamental in terms of that process. If the spatial plan underpins the key relationship between local and central government, and it's an important framework to agree priorities and support effective partnering. So this is a very fundamental part of that whole relationship. I guess the next thing to note is this draft spatial plan doesn't come out of a vacuum, and indeed it's part of a long piece of work that's been going on for 15 years or so, stemming from the Greater Christchurch Partnership's urban development strategy. And it's part of a large body of work that's previously been through before this council in terms of a number of background reports prepared to inform the evidence base. Just in terms of the architecture, if you like, of the spatial plan, and that's actually set out in a very useful table, I think on page 7 of your agenda. It's a table there that actually sets out some of the key concepts of the spatial plan. But just to describe that briefly, the work came up with 6 key opportunities, and I won't name those. They're highlighted in the agenda paper. And so those key opportunities have been identified for how the spatial plan can help close the gap between current and desired future states for Greater Christchurch. Following that, there are a number of directions, and there's 2 key directions, and they're identified as the focus: growth through targeted intensification in urban and town centres and along public transport corridors. The second, to enable prosperous development of kainga and ohanga on Māori land and in urban areas. Following that, we have, 5 key moves, and I won't read those out. There's 5 key moves that are seen as fundamental to realising the transformational shifts required to achieve the desired future and support intergenerational well-being. So I guess in terms of the spatial plan, it's these opportunities, direction, key moves that is basically makes up the engine of the spatial plan. So that's just a quick jump through some of the key points, and I'll just pass now to Tracy if you'd like to say a few words.
Actually, Tim did that brilliantly, but I did actually want to take the opportunity to acknowledge, I guess, from my view from Secretariat, since I've been involved, but also prior from my career being involved in GCP, the outstanding work that the Selwyn team have contributed. This has been an at-pace piece of work on top of an already busy workload. And I just really want to acknowledge the strategic thinking and the collegiality and just the sheer hard work that's gone in. So just really want to appreciate that, and of course the support we've had from our governors at the table as well. It's kind of been amazing, I guess, what attracted me to the role. So just want to thank you for that.
Thank you for that. And Ben, for the work that your team's done behind the scenes to make sure that Selwyn's flavours right through this plan. I guess this report and the next report actually fit together. There's a whole lot that's about the spatial plan and the MRT conversation, and the future of transport being so linked to where we end up living and working and things. So I don't know if you've got things you're going to say on the next report as well that you'd like to say now, or just treat them both separately.
Maybe I can invite Maisie to come to the table for that MRT. So you want to do them together?
Well, no, we can do this now. Are there any questions on this one? We've had a workshop and it's gone through, but Elizabeth first and then Grant.
Page 75, it says the growing population is going to become more ethnically diverse, with more people identifying as Māori, Pacifica and Asian, forming a larger share of the young people in the working age population. Is that due to is there going to be a real push for a mass migration into New Zealand? Because at the moment, I can't give the exact stats, but we're particularly not in that space right now, and it just seems a little alarming that in such a short time we're looking at a real transition in terms of our population and what that looks like. And yeah, it just sounds like a very fluid kind of thing, and I'd like to see a bit more balance and what we've got going on here, and really securing strong communities in the way where we're not having too much disruption to that. I also probably should say that there's a lot of things to like in the GCP model, but there are some concerns that have been raised to me by members of the community, particularly those that have moved here from other countries, have talked about what's going on in Europe and are quite concerned about some of the international global trends. And I think people would like to see New Zealand have its own flavour and not just take on something that's a global trend.
I'd like you, Tracy, to help me out here. But in terms of the first part of your question, these are projections that have been made based on current trends. And so in terms of that, I guess, diversity, there certainly is a trend moving in that direction, and the demographics behind this would have followed some technical evidence. I would imagine that would have come up with those projections, but they are just projections, and they are based on a series of assumptions, and we don't know what the future looks like. But I think it's safe to say that there will be greater diversity as there's more immigration, and we're seeing that currently not only within Selwyn but also in Greater Christchurch. Tracy, have you got anything to add to that? Sorry.
Look, respect, you can completely understand where you're coming from. I think the plan is a strategic high level to say it could go many different directions, but our communities will be underserved if we don't do that thinking and sit and go, if that was to happen, and there's so many variables that could affect that, are we starting to plan now for that to happen in a way that enhances communities? And from my perspective, that's what I've heard all through this planning from all the partners, is how do we look after our people, keep the needs met, whether we're this size or this size. So of course, the really important thing about any strategy, it will be reviewed. So there's at least a 3-year cycle, and it can be more frequent if something happened, but at least we've got the really clear background and underpinning to then drive, if variables come in, how are we going to adapt?
And I think from the beginning, the idea that this was at 700,000 people was always a bit low compared to the growth that we know we've received here and that Greater Christchurch has had. So the population at 1.5 million will enable a whole lot more to happen in the city and Greater Christchurch for us. And that's going to rely on a whole lot of immigration to occur, and people moving from around New Zealand and people moving from all around the world to want to be here. So that we'll see a change in our communities and a greater diversity come here. Yeah. Grant.
Thank you for all the work that you've put into a comprehensive document. I realise that we've talked about this in workshops, but I want to reiterate that I feel that we are being undersold on capacity. When you look at the numbers, particularly around in an ideal world, you'd have 20% overcapacity to provide competitiveness and price affordability. We don't achieve that through the numbers within this report for Selwyn. Between 10 and 15% is the numbers. The predictions around the long term, what kind of typology we'll have in Selwyn in the long term, are still 96% standalone units. And so it gives you an indication of the demand and the requirements in Selwyn. The time that I've been here, and Sam alluded to it, we've consistently undershot what the demand is in Selwyn. And I don't think that's going to change, particularly with the transport corridor being opened up. I suppose, I don't know what the word is, but I sort of feel it's a bit paternalistic, and it's been driven by my view as Christchurch desire to re-centralise housing around their corridors. But we're here to bat for Selwyn, and I think this document intends to pull Selwyn up short. It ingrains that nature of hold back Selwyn. We want to intensify, particularly the MDRS provisions. I've brought this before, is that we are going through this explosive growth period where we are having a lot of new developers putting pipes in the ground. As yet, there's no clear direction from this report or from central government as to what that infrastructure looks like. Should we be scaling it for 3 units per section over the whole development? Should we be at 1.8 or 1.5? There's a hang of a lot of potential liability for us as a council, which is not addressed in the infrastructure strategies. And I'm not seeing this being addressed in any meaningful way in this document. It notes there's a shortfall in Selwyn in the medium term of 3,250 units, and just says, we'll sort that out in the future. To me, that's not good enough. I don't think that we have really, what we've been called out through the NPS on urban development is we've allowed developers to take control of where, when and how things get delivered to varying degrees of success. Some are good, some are not quite so good. But we've certainly seen road widths, accessibility and public transport not being as adequately provided as we would have hoped. And I'd like to talk further about that when we get into the MRT concept. So there in a nutshell is no question. It's just how I feel about this document. And it's no denigration of the amount of work you put in, because I know you've worked extremely hard. But that's my view on how Selwyn's being treated in this.
Thanks, Grant. Deborah.
Thank you. And I do appreciate all the work that's gone into looking at the development of growth in Selwyn. But we also have the national policy statement on highly productive land that has come in since the spatial plan's been worked on. We also have freshwater management, and that is a concern, especially with regards to the peripheral flows that actually flow through the urban parts of growth areas in the strategy towards Te Waihora. And just with regards to looking at Selwyn's perspective, and I guess Waimakariri will also have their perspective with regards to management of their waterways. I tend to think that going forward, there needs to be some sort of comprehensive plan with regards to how we are actually going to manage those two national policy statements that have come out, and the impact that they are going to have on what we've planned for the growth structure. And maybe it's, maybe this was just how, and because these national policy statements are here, how are we going to fit them into this document? That's going to be my question, because we have a responsibility to actually implement them. And I just want to understand how they're implemented in this draft document, given that it is a strategic document, but we still have to, put those issues in.
Cool. So let's remind ourselves that this is full consultation. So we're going to hear lots of feedback from our community on this through June, July. I think it's in here. And so actually this is an important part of this is understanding we've had good engagement so far. I think we're going to hear the same things over again, and people get sick and tired of being asked and telling us the same thing again. But that's all part of this process. Both ministers have approved where this needs to go. And Deborah, I think that's a good question to us to find out, has all of our planning and the NDRS changes and the legislation that's over the last 18 months caused us no end of pain, been included in the work that's gone into inform what we're going to be talking to the community about?
No, I agree with that, Sam. Look, the HPL Highly Protected Land National Policy Statement is part of the, the part of the spatial plan in terms of the layers that's put in, and there's no growth areas that I'm aware of that actually impinges upon that outside of the urban boundaries. Obviously, there's more work to go on the HPL, and it needs to be mapped and put into the regional policy statement and play through the district plans over the next number of years. But currently, in terms of the, the direction of the spatial plan, it's identifying some natural areas that you can't impinge upon, and the idea is, to develop intensification along existing urban areas and town centres and along transport corridors. And if anything, that sort of focus is complementary to keeping off greenfield development that might spread onto the HPL. So it is certainly part of the mix in terms of how the spatial plan ended up. Tracy, would you like to?
Thank you. Move and second for this report. Thank you, Sophie. Malcolm. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare carried. The next item is the Greater Christchurch Public Transport Futures Mass Rapid Transit Indicative Business Case. Andrew.
Okay, thank you very much. Just by means of an introduction, I think we have had some recent presentations from the team, particularly Wakatahi and Richard Osborne, in regards to where the MRT business case has got to. I'd just like to remind the council that it's interesting, there's been 6 previous reports done on this type of concept since 2011, trying to get over the line in regards to what we can do and plan for MRT or what have you. And so this is actually the first time that we're actually managed to get across the line with an MRT that's going to work. Admittedly, the MRT system is based around Christchurch, but that's where it has to work. As we've talked about before, the report, the IBC that we've got in front of us has looked at how it can connect to the districts and has found that it's not effective or efficient to do so in terms, particularly from a cost perspective, when you relate it to the limited amount of patronage and boardings that the system would attract. And so really where we've got to is a MRT system for the city, linking between Belfast and ultimately Hornby through the centre of the city with direct bus services to the districts, being Waimak and Selwyn, obviously. I think probably the best summary of all the combinations and permutations of what was investigated is on page 491 of your agenda. It's a chart that shows how all the various scenarios were looked at and assessed in terms of going through a proper business case process. And so where we've ended up is with the recommendation for the option of the MRT system in the central city with the enhanced and direct and express services for the districts. How that will morph going forward in terms of how it's delivered is the next big question. Obviously, all this work is couched around the Greater Christchurch Partnerships PT Futures original business case process, and this is just the MRT is just part of that, being both the foundations, the rest of network, and MRT being the three tranches to that whole concept of how we go forward with PT in the future. So this is just a step. It's an important step, and there's a lot of water that still has to go under the bridge in terms of getting ourselves over the line in terms of what then the next phase of this whole process will be, which will be a detailed business case. And essentially where we're at the moment, right here, right now, is basically giving the sign off on that aspect in terms that we can then move forward into those further business case phases to try and work this out further and lock it down further, with the ultimate aim, obviously, to attract funding, particularly from central government, because I think we're all realistic around this table that we won't be able to afford this on our own.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. And again, just note that it was supported at the Whakawhanake Committee late last week. Anna was here last time and talked through some of the reasoning behind the business case that we got to so far. I think from, again, the Selwyn perspective, thinking about what the future of the links look like here and getting an MRT South link that is from Hornby to Rolleston and the thinking of this work, rather than just finishing in Hornby and then becomes an extended bus service, is something that we have talked about wanting to see. This current business case doesn't have that as a part of it, so that's sort of to acknowledge that up front. And one of the other conversations that's been going on is about regional rail or interregional rail, and that has been bubbling for many years. Raised that at the committee on Friday, and whether that's from Springfield or from Timaru, the regional Transport Committee is looking at bringing back a different piece on that. So because this piece of work is heading away from the heavy rail, well, at the beginning, we didn't know whether it was or not. And so the interregional train travel was put off until this was decided. So now that we know where, well, if approved, where this is going, that will then allow the conversation around what is interregional rail. Is there a possibility there? What would that look like? How would it run? And the two don't conflict in the way they might have, had heavy rail being the preferred option here. I think one of the key things for me is, was shared last time, was the cost benefit analysis being positive. The timing of doing this now before things are even further built out means that it's easier to do here and achieve than it is in some other cities. And the Minister Wood sort of said, you know, all very well Christchurch thinking about this, but you're kind of fourth on the list. And I made sure he knew that we might be fourth on the list, but we will be the cheapest and the easiest to deliver. And actually, just because we're fourth in line doesn't mean we shouldn't be the first one delivered. And I think we need to think about how we can work with the government to enable big infrastructure projects to be delivered well and done when it's simpler rather than trickier. And doing it now is going to be far cheaper than doing it into the future by delaying. So I'm behind trying to get this done and delivered and getting the next decision around the next part of the business case done. I guess today we're not launching this. This isn't about telling the community that it's going to happen and we can't wait to get consents done and start digging in the ground. There's a few more processes to go through, but unless we pass this here, it doesn't go further. Andrew, did you have something else to say?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Putting those different perspectives on it, Ms. Sam. I think, yes, from what we've looked at in regards to developing the business case, while we're saying that no, MRT in its purest form is not viable for the districts in the short, medium or long term, potentially, if things changed in the future and we managed to get the momentum to be able to have a better MRT service extended out to the districts, particularly for us at Rolleston, that future would probably lie utilising the heavy rail link. The problem that we have, particularly between Rolleston and Hornby, or anywhere really, is the fact that most of that rail network is a single track. And really, to make this work, it needs to be double tracked. Obviously, you have a problem when you have freight trains and passenger trains all trying to compete for the same limited space. We also know that there are some very serious constraints with the technology that is being used to operate the rail system. I think that we can all say and imagine it's relatively old, and again, not conducive to being able to deal with the demands of, for instance, higher frequency trains being put on to essentially a freight network. But you're entirely correct. That aspect about regional rail is important, and I know both yourself and I, as well through my channels, have been pushing this point quite considerably, because we again see that as potentially being the ability to optimise around both an extension of MRT perhaps out to Rolleston, and also a connection to a wider regional network, which we could see potentially having some benefits going forward in the future. But really, yeah, as for us, it's then now trying to work out how we optimise around better PT bus services. And we've talked about before the challenges of setting up park and rides, where we need to do that, how we need to do that, and things like that. So that's probably the key focus for us going forward at this point as a council.
Thanks, Andrew. Any questions or comments? Yeah, move. Grant.
Sorry, I thought there might be more people interested in this. Again, this is the danger, I suppose, of having presentations and briefings. Some of the councillors will have heard what I want to say, but it's important that it is said in an open meeting as well. I am really concerned by this, because it appears, and I really think there's been a lot of well done work put in this case. Absolutely don't. I think it's a great business case, really comprehensive. But again, putting our Selwyn hat on, we're not learning the lessons of history. If you look back at any other place that is now, particularly our friends in Auckland, Mangere used to be out in the Wops. It's now surrounded by housing. Here, with our own airport, was out in the Wops, now surrounded by housing. We've got a brand new town developing in Rolleston, which is not having the right infrastructure put in at the construction stage to develop in a logical and sequenced way to provide public transport. And so while it might be great to stop at Hornby, really it's trying to encourage a brownfield regen project in Hornby, whereas we are in dire need of having it here. And when you look at the costings, the incremental cost to come to Rolleston is not much. Normally, I'm a very big fan of not spending where it's not required, but in this instance, I think only a fool would decide to build a short, small piece of network and not look to the future and build it for where the growth's going to come. And Sam, you've talked extensively about how we see growth in the future coming into the northwest corridor, which is here. This is a case where you should be planning for the future and saying, yeah, the demand's not here today, but if we build a network, it'll come. And if we're taking this to government, and government thinks this is our position, it's certainly not my position, because I think when you look at costings versus the costings of the Auckland MRT and Wellington MRT projects, if it's on a cost-benefit ratio, or actual cost, not cost-benefit ratio, but cost to the economy, we'll be first on the list, because we're the cheapest and the fastest to deliver. So those comments you all would have heard before, but I think it's important that they are aired in a public forum, and I think we should advocate harder on our behalf. And Sam, I encourage you to keep doing that.
Thanks, Grant. Elizabeth.
Sophie, did you jump off?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what I was going to say, so you go first.
Okay. What I wanted to say was just along the lines of at the moment there's a real push to deter drivers and deter people from taking their cars out through various means, and one of them is obviously making it more expensive, making it more frustrating, etc., etc. But it's not really deterring people, it is hacking them off, but it's not making them think, right, I'm going to take a bus because you're annoying me so much with my car, or it's getting expensive. It's just putting pressure on them and stressing them, but it's not actually putting them onto public transport. Having a good read of what the comments coming through here about what's going to put people onto public transport is a real change in the culture and the way people think. And that primarily comes down to the way that the routes are operational. So at the moment, it seems like you're kind of waiting to change the culture once all this infrastructure is put in. Why are we not seeing some staggered changes now, so that we're starting to build a culture of people actually wanting to transfer and change over with more direct links and more direct routes, particularly looking at high efficiency times? So if you're looking at work times, like obviously in Wellington, the commuter trains are a real big hit. Why? Because they run at the right times of commuter times. So having a look at what's going to be efficient for us now to start to get a culture of taking the bus, taking the train, making them direct, not doing big fluffy routes and lots of stops is another thing. Yes, we don't have all the bus lanes that you might have in the future, but I don't think that should just put us off from making these changes now. And it would be something nice to go back to the group and ask to start to see some incentives, because a reduction in bus fares doesn't seem to be pulling the numbers and the kind of transformation that you're after.
Yeah, very good question. And really what we're looking at today is only part of the jigsaw puzzle on all of this. We are definitely trying to work towards a societal behavioural change to promote people to use alternative modes such as walking, cycling, PT, etc., to get them out of private cars, because it's quite evident that that situation is not going to be sustainable going forward as we grow, that we have equally a growing number of people using cars. It's just not sustainable. So there is actually a whole process being built around this aspect of behaviour change. And the PT Futures business case, which I alluded to before, is part of that. But also the biggest one that's come out from a central government perspective is obviously around climate change, reducing transport emissions. And part of the delivery of that is through what they call the VKT reduction plan, vehicle kilometres travel plan, which is all about working towards incentivising people to change their behaviours to get out of their private cars and use more sustainable transport modes such as walking, cycling and PT. And so I'll be having a briefing with you next week talking about a lot of these things, and we'll show you how that all those bits of those jigsaws fit together, because it really comes back to that whole aspect of integrated land use and transport planning, so that we make things easier and better for people to utilise those other modes as opposed to getting in their car. The point being is that always the challenge with PT is that you will only get people using PT more if they feel that it's an advantage to them over using their own cars. And so you've got to make it frequent, reliable, safe, etc., all those good things in terms of what a PT system needs to do. And particularly for the MRT work that we've been doing, it really focuses on that aspect, accepting the focus at the moment is for within the city, because that's essentially where we can get the biggest bang for buck. We can't necessarily do that, achieve that same thing out here in the districts yet, but we are having to work towards that.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you very much. And I guess I just want to point out that there's a whole lot of questions that everyone has and what we want that the spatial plan and MRT can't actually fix, because this is a sub-regional plan for how we're dealing with what we need to deal with right now. But all the bigger stuff around the National Adaptation Plan, emissions reductions, Building Act, if you wanted housing, more efficient housing, which we do, but that's all national government stuff. Even district plan, we have our commissioners here, the hearings are all but done. This is what we can do right now, and it's going out for consultation as far as the spatial plan's going. Business case for the MRT. I'm just really glad to see that it's gotten to this stage, because it's been such a long road. And I definitely appreciate Grant's points that it doesn't go out to Rolleston. I'm going to stick a yet on that, because it is in there. But we don't, you know, I think I looked it up, it's page 536 in our agendas. It shows where we are in Rolleston and also Rangiora around population density and housing density. We're not there. That's the reason why we're not in the place. Like there's distance and there's density, and we haven't got either of them yet. So this isn't a question. This is the classic, you know, I'm not making a question, it's a comment. When we come around to things like the future Selwyn stuff, remember this conversation and actually support higher density and help explain to a community, certain sectors of the community who don't want higher density, why it's necessary in all its various forms. Short-term change, long-term gain. We can't have one without the other. It just doesn't happen. Doesn't work that way. Thanks.
Exactly, Malcolm.
I'd just like to reiterate the comments that the Mayor made originally and Grant as well. I mean, having been on the committee in the last triennium, they're very aware of our desire to have mass rapid transit out here. Time and time again, the Mayor and I have commented about the growing populations of Lincoln, Rolleston and Prebleton, and how a link between the whole lot somewhere up Selwyn Road would be very advantageous. So I know the transport planners are very aware, but as Sophie has eloquently put, our population density is not quite there. My concern has always been a corridor. And if we can get a corridor established, then you can put whatever transport mode you want to put on it in the future. And I would ask any of the councillors around the table, and those that do take the bus, I take the bus to the city. The 80 is very efficient and it's not very expensive. It's about us leading by example and getting into mode shifts. So well done.
Thanks, Malcolm. Shane?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for the report. I think it's important to speak on behalf of what we are talking about after Grant raised the point of having open discussions, and I think you've fairly well covered it. Me, Sam, Grant, Malcolm and Sophie with your eloquent delivery. The delivery of services depends on the density of the population, and without one you won't get the other. However, the forecast in short term, in the long term, as we've heard from both the Mayor and Councillor Miller, predicts are we selling ourselves short is really the question. Are you comfortable in the report and those that attend the committees that this is the best outcome for now, and that by activating this it gets us to the next stage to then look at providing services for the future indicative of our forecast growth as indicated in our infometrics at the start of the report, and that includes the draft spatial. So I'm happy and proud to support it, and proud to support everyone's work here at the table and the many years of this getting to this point. If it gets us to the next level of engagement to provide more options for our people into the future as we grow. One of the questions or perhaps clarifications is around the continued use of freight and passenger rail. Actually, the planes do it all the time where they have them as both, so freight and passenger on the same service and the same line. So perhaps that might be a way of thinking about the future, knowing that airlines do it every day and it's a major commercial contributor. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. And just on that last point, freight and passenger transport with rail really did not work, and all the feedback was the reliability of the transport network for passengers needed to be on time and reliable all the time, whereas it didn't need to for freight. And so there's actually quite a clash with trying to bring those things together in rail sense. Thank you. Are we moving second this one? No.
Also,
thanks, Malcolm. Shane, all those in favour say aye.
aye.
Anyone against? Declare it carries. Thanks, Tracy. Andrew, Tim. That's great. We have the register of documents signed and sealed, 3 transactions, moved and seconded. Deborah, thank you. Seconded. Lydia, thank you. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Declare it carried. Resolution to exclude the public. Nicole, thank you. Deborah, thanks. All those in favour, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you for joining us in the public part of this meeting, and we'll close down the transmission.
Thanks, Andrew.
We'll continue straight into the next part of the meeting once that is finished.